I'm BrianVee, and this is Why We Work. Today, I have the great pleasure of speaking with Ron Lovett. Ron is an entrepreneur, keynote speaker, and the author of Outrageous Empowerment. He also has a podcast, Scaling Culture. And today, I want to talk about culture, culture in the company, and how the employer and employee can contribute so everyone is in an environment that works well. Join me in my conversation today with Ron Lovett. I'm BrianVee, and this is Why We Work. Today, I have the great pleasure of speaking with Ron Lovett. Good evening, or maybe even afternoon, fine sir.
Good morning, man. It's 10 after 9 in East Coast time.
Yeah, you got me. You got the sun.
How come you didn't introduce me as your old friend?
Well, I kind of wanted to, but then I was like, man, this guy's so business, and I'm from Sackville. Like, what do you?
You're from Sac Vegas, by the
Sac
way.
Vegas, Lower Sackville, Nova Scotia. And it's good that you say that, Ron, because I was thinking about this interview today, and I was thinking, you are a guy that I've always appreciated. And you may not know my view of you, or I may not know your view of
Careful,
me.
Brian. I can do Taekwondo too. Careful what you say now.
No, but I've always appreciated your view on things, the way that you approach people, the way you treated people, the way you've treated me. And I would say we've encountered one another a few handfuls of times, gone to the same places, but
Yeah.
I think it's a mutual friendship and a respect for one another. And I just wanted to say that I do appreciate the work you're doing, and I'd like to get into that now. But just, you mentioned friendship, and I appreciate the work that you're doing, especially there in Atlantic, Canada. And you're you're grinding it out, and I truly appreciate that. The more that I see what you're doing, it's very impressive.
No,
So
thanks,
Ron,
Brian.
so can you give us a snapshot of what you're doing right now? I did give a brief introduction, but just a
Yeah.
little snapshot of who you are.
Yeah, this is kind of chapter 2, right, for me in I guess in the career journey. So I don't know what you said in the intro, but I was in private security industry and serial entrepreneur, construction, restaurants. I kind of done a bunch of everything. Imports company, and I used to import acai from Brazil before anybody knew what it was. I had lighters from Thailand and clothing and carpets from Morocco. I mean, I was just kind of really unfocused and trying to do all kinds of things. And anyways, I sold that company. My main business was Source Security, as you knew that
Yeah,
company,
yeah.
and I sold that in 2017 to Allied Universal out of California. So I call this chapter 2, because the question was, what's next? What am I going to do? And it's funny, Brian, because most entrepreneurs that I speak to, that can be a dark time for them. It's like, wow, I did that business for 15 years. That was my identity. That's what I did. And then they sell it or close the business. And it's like this, they go into a dark place of like, I've lost my sense of purpose and my identity. I looked at it the opposite. I looked at it and thought, man, I've been grinding that business out, that industry. That was a grind. We had over 3,000 employees across Canada, and my phone rang 24/7 for a period. I would fly around concert to concert. I'd be on tour with Jay-Z or AC/DC and just answering the phone 24/7. You couldn't even have a conversation with me. Once we got our culture right, which I know we're going to talk about, things really changed. But I really looked at it and thought, wow, I can take what I learned in that industry and apply it anywhere. I have no handcuffs on anymore. I can do anything. And that was really exciting to me. And so, today my main business, so one of my main companies is called Vita Living, which does
Mm.
workforce housing. So affordable living for Canadians today, because we have properties in Winnipeg, New Brunswick, and Nova Scotia. We've got just over 600 units, apartment units. And it's about trying to create a place where Canadians are proud to live, affordable places that people are proud to live and not need to live in. And I'm having lots of fun, and then I've got my other business, Conley Owens, which does people and culture training. We've got a master class coming out, and we'll do consulting, application design, and we run a peer-to-peer program. And then I actually linked up with a small entrepreneur here and got into a roofing business. So I own a company called Novus, which is the Latin word for innovation, Novus Roofing. That was kind of that's something I fell into during the pandemic, and that's it. And then raising kids, I got 2 kids and 1 in the oven, and things are good.
Ron, bring us back. Like I said, we grew up in more of a high school time, but what would have been your very first job? the first thing that got you out of the house, and
Yeah.
what was your motivation to do it?
You know, my very first job, like not
Yep.
something I did on my own, but my job was paper routes. You know, everybody, I
Nice.
feel like that was the
Nice.
thing to do. And I had two. I had Chronicle Herald back then, and I had the Daily News. And so I had the two papers, and I was always hustling. I mean, I hustled all the time, and it wasn't great. My mom would tell you stories that she would. Um, the guy would come to collect their portion of the Daily News, and sometimes I would have spent all the money, and she would have to write a
I got
check.
I got fired from the Daily News for throwing
Yeah,
mine in the
right, right.
ditch.
I think that was my last day too. My mom said, "This isn't a good job where I have to pay them for your portion."
Yeah.
Anyways, that was probably my first job. But I mean, I guess the why behind that, I really enjoyed it. I liked getting out. I liked, I liked the different aspects of the job of trying to sell people the paper and collect the money.
How
And
old were you, Ron?
oh man, I mean, I got probably what 11, 10, 11, something like that, 12.
Y- That's good. And you said you have an idea of this podcast. And the idea is to encourage people, even who have children. You said you have two, one in the oven. The idea of
Yeah,
encouraging kids to get out and to work and to remind people of the paths that we have taken to get where we
yeah.
are. So as you started to get older and into your teens, what are some other jobs that you had, and how did that start to shape you? Because Ron, I'm listening to the stuff that's coming. The experience, you're on boards, you're on the EO Accelerator Canada expert. You started the Celebrity Connect.
Yeah, that was a
.ca.
company with Shama Jumder that I started. The Canadian comedian Shama Jumder. We had a
Yeah,
company called Celeb Connect. Yeah, yeah. I mean, I've kind of done a bunch of things.
you're doing a lot of things. So where is this spirit of it? I mean, that entrepreneurial spirit, where is that coming from you?
You know, um, so my background, you wouldn't have known this, but my parents separated at a very young age,
No,
maybe when I was
I
three
knew
months
that.
old.
Yeah,
Right, my father was from Florida, and my father was in the drug business. I mean,
yeah,
he was in the drug business.
yeah.
With connections allegedly to Pablo Escobar. And so he hustled. I didn't meet him until I was 21, and of course
Yeah.
I had my own path at that age until the age of 21. I was also playing on the other side of the fence, and weirdly enough, because I didn't know my father, and because I was involved in the pot business, and I just I think a few things. Look, I always wanted to build my own life. I knew that my mom had no money. We lived with my grandmother until, and stints with my aunt until we bought our first home when my mom remarried a guy named Barry Lovett. And that's where I changed my name because my original name was Ronald Francis Poe the Third, because my father name he was Ron Poe and my grandfather's Ron Poe. And so, look, I just always, I think there was two things that drove me. One, I didn't love my household. My mom traveled a lot and my stepfather was home and we didn't have a great relationship. So doing any type of work or going out was escapism. It was just
Yeah.
me ways to get out of the home. That was for sure. And then I wanted to make my own path. I just thought, I always, I use why and why not a lot. Why
Yeah.
do people do things this way and why not do it a different
Different
way?
way.
And I've always had, I've got ADHD and I'm dyslexic and so somehow, I don't know if it's DNA or how it worked out, but I've got a very strong thirst for learning. I like learning new things. I like doing new things. And I'm very, and I want to be clear. What's the word? I'm, you know, I'm selfish about what I learn. If I'm not interested,
Hmm.
I'm a horrible learner. I was bad
Yeah.
in school. I
Yeah.
didn't do well in school at all. But if I'm interested in the topic, I'm a really good learner. I can be a great listener or a horrible listener depending on what I'm listening to. So yeah, I think those are some
Some
of
of
the
the
reasons.
drives.
I think at a high level, I think today I have different reasons too. And as that went on, by the way, because I think I have different whys at different stages. So I think there's three phases, right? My first phase was get out, get away, get out of the house, make some money, create a new path for myself. Second phase was I'm going to prove to my stepfather, who really he didn't believe in me, or my father, who
Hmm.
left at a young age,
Yeah.
that I could do something really great. So I was really out to prove, and that was in my own head. I just that was the driver for a long time. And then when I've had my own kids and sold my first business, I have a different why now. I think the why today is to, to show my kids the importance of work and how you can connect to your work and to help people. I certainly am involved with businesses that are in a transition stage of giving back, and personally, I'm in a bit of a transition of giving back in some of the stuff I do too. So it's a different why. I think you get to different whys at different levels, or my path has been like that.
It's really interesting you say that. I would say I have, in some ways, very similar experiences in that my mom and dad, they were divorced when I was in my mom's belly, from what I have been told.
From what
And
you remember.
from what I remember. And the idea, though, is those whys still for me overlap. And while it's great to have children and a dear wife and they still overlap. And I feel like, as I mentioned to you before this, is that my mom passed away. I did a lot for my mom, like the idea of to impress my mom or to show my mom, look, I wasn't a complete waste of your time and effort, and some of those overlap. So it's funny how we're encouraged, and it's funny what motivates us through our lives, but it's good that they do change and they do kind of fluctuate with importance in our lives. So as you went into and through high school, how did you start to meander about getting serious about your work?
Yeah, I mean, high school was a crazy time for me. I don't know if I was serious about
Or
work. I mean,
even after high school, like even
yeah.
when did
So
it?
so after high school, I worked as a dishwasher at Eastside Mario's.
East
I
Side
sold
Mario's, East
marijuana.
Side Mario's.
Right? The
I would
first one
love
that
that.
opened in Bears Lake, I was there as a dishwasher. I was doing those high school Quebec trips. I was selling to high schools to run their Quebec trips, and
Thank you very much for those trips. They were great
that's
and
right. You're
marvelous.
welcome. And then I was working as a kayak instructor at Seaside Kayak, and then I was selling pot to my friends. I mean, I had 4 jobs, and so, um, and I really enjoyed I much more enjoyed stuff that had no ceiling to it. And what I mean by that is I liked the sales job more because there was no ceiling. The efforts that I put in was the outcome that I got. And so my first, other sales job that I got from that was I was selling cell phones it was ClearNet back then, who was acquired by TELUS. And they had that talk, it was what, Talk 30 or something. All you could talk for $30 a month. And I was an outside sales guy, zero. Everything was commission based, but I was a top sales guy in the province. I crushed the corporate guys who were making 40 to 60,000. I mean, I was just crushing them. And I really enjoyed that. I really liked when there wasn't a ceiling. I don't like ceilings where you're paid 15 an hour and that's your ceiling. Maybe you get the odd bonus, but that's really your ceiling. I didn't do as well in those environments.
When I was thinking earlier, and it was something I was going to say, and that it reminds me, how would you, I mean, you can't grow up with hard knocks. You can't choose to, but I think the hard knocks that people go through and maybe what you've gone through
Yeah.
really helped you to, to one, appreciate what you have, but also see the different side and see different angles and to be able to approach situations like you have with these big businesses. And I believe, reviews that I hear of people talking about you is that you really get it. You really understand the problems, the issues that are going on in business. And for a person who's so young, is only in your 40s and doing so well, I think by looking back and seeing hard knocks, while one could dwell on them, they've actually helped you a lot along the way.
Yeah, I don't disagree, Brian. I think that there's 4 categories you can run into. If you have a hard upbringing or hard knocks, whatever you want to call it, you can either, you know, just marinate in your own self pity, right?
Hmm.
And that's no good. You could, unfortunately, become what you grew up in, and so
Yep.
you take on a lot of maybe the bad things of those hard knocks. Or third, you make a big shift and you totally shift. You leave everything behind and you totally shift. But then there's this fourth that a guy
Hmm.
talked to me about one time, and which is, it was very interesting. He said, because I was talking about these 3, and he said, well, Ron, there's a fourth, because there's some stuff from your path you should carry forward with. There's some things that are helpful. You can't just throw everything out. And he was right. And that made me go back and say, what things am I going to carry forward here? Because, yeah, I think that those are probably 4 major buckets. And I think you're absolutely right. And that's something that, keeps me up at night a little bit now is my children are going to have a very different life than I had, and how do I instill those values? And, it starts with small things like when my daughter wants something at the store, I say, we can't afford it. It's
Mhm.
bullshit, but I say we can't afford it, and it cuts her off. And I was joking the other day to a friend of mine. He was like, "Geez, Ron, like you can't afford it. That's kind of silly." And I said, "No, it's not. It's. I'm playing chess here, and these are some early stage moves that someone will remember later."
Yeah.
And I said, and sometime I'm tempted to just shut the water and the lights off in our house and say, "Yeah, we just couldn't afford it, right?" But maybe that's going too far.
Well, it's true. Last year, my kids wanted a bike, so we went on. There's an app you can get used stuff, kind
Yeah,
of like a Craigslist or something. Here, it's Carrot, and I said we're buying used bikes. We're just going to buy these bike. If this is the bikes that they can have a bike, but it was like $25. And my dear
yeah.
wife was like, "No, no, let's buy a new bike." I'm no, no. We're going to learn a lesson here that
Mm.
money is not free. So what is it that you're doing now, Ron? In what is the process that you go through in the work that you do?
Yeah. So look, I've learned a lot. I think from a work perspective, I think there's two themes that are important to me and that I've carried forward into my work today. And I'll call this in chapter 2. um, and those two things are this. One is the power of a strong purpose. Having a purpose, everyone has their personal why, but your business should have a why. And my purpose in the private security industry was to change the industry, do everything different. If someone said they like this, then or here's the way to do things, then I would literally try to find a different way to do things. And so
Did you know that right away, or did you learn
no,
that you learned it as you
I
were
learned
going?
that I didn't even I had the company for 15 years. We didn't even land on a purpose until year 10, 11, actually, right? I was at rock bottom and I figured that out. So my point on that is that carry forward was a few things. I wouldn't start a company today without baking in the purpose. So, for instance, the
Hmm.
purpose at Beta Living is to revolutionize affordable communities.
Yeah.
And for me, this is really important. I was talking about this with an investor yesterday. As fluffy as that sounds, especially maybe to an older generation in some cases, because I don't think a lot of business had purpose. The entrepreneurs that are maybe in their late 50s, 60s, and some still don't today. But for me, what that does, it doesn't just drive, it's not just the North Star to say, hey, team, are we doing this? Are the technology we're using doing this? Are the service we're providing doing this? But it's for me to say, okay, Ron, if that's the company purpose to revolutionize affordable communities, then Brian, if you approach me and say, hey, Ron, we should invest in this condo project that has 10 condo units and a commercial property below, that has nothing to do with revolutionizing affordable communities. So I'm out. And so
Hmm.
it actually puts handcuffs on me and forces me to focus. And that's very important for me as an entrepreneur. I need the purpose to keep me in a lane. And so it's easy for me to say, no, I had, when I started Vita, I had 60,000 square feet of commercial property that had nothing to do with revolutionizing affordable communities. So I sold it all. And so it's kept me extremely focused. That's lesson one, strong purpose to not just guide the company, but to, in some cases, if you can create a purpose that keeps you, so for instance, if my purpose, Brian, was create the best experience for tenants on the planet. Well,
Yeah.
that's too broad. Now I can do your commercial project. I can do I'm going to become a master of nothing, right? So I wanted to keep affordable in communities in there to keep me in a lane. And that attaches with my second real lesson that I've carried forward. And through Entrepreneurs Organization, they do this, they do an entrepreneur master program in conjunction with MIT each year, where now Entrepreneurs Organization, would have maybe 12,000 members worldwide, and typically 1,000 apply to get into this thing, and they'll shortlist it down, and they'll take about 70 entrepreneurs each year. And it's a 3-day program. It's a 3-year, 3-day, 3 days each year in Boston. And so I got in maybe 4 years ago, and it was incredible. I mean, it was 65 entrepreneurs from 29 different countries. Like that is like, to me, that's my tribe. Like, I mean,
Yeah.
I just feel so at home with these folks. And so there was a speaker that said, look, if you want to build what they coined, Brian, a unicorn company, which just meant like some company that does incredible things, right?
Hmm.
He said, you take an industry and you really look at that industry and you pick out 10% that you can really focus on, and then you own 70% of that 10. You're so focused. And so what he means is, if you're going to get into carpentry, then you can build houses, you could build shells, you could do flooring. But what if you're a carpenter who just does flooring? That's the 10%. Then if
Mhm.
you think about this logically, you become better. You become better at just dropping floors. You figure out the best material, the best way to do it. And so you're so narrowly focused that your knowledge is better. Your relationships within the flooring industry are better because that's all you do. You're just going to beat everybody, And so I really took that to heart, because in my security business, I did go from a place where, and I talk about it in the book, Outrageous Empowerment, where we went from, we were maybe a $3.5 million company that had 650 customers to a $10 million business that had 82 customers. So I did get focused, but only halfway there, because our customer it had two things. It had to be asset backed. And so, it had to have an arena or a hospital in the
Mhm,
physical
mhm.
guarding space. And it had to have 24 hours of service to fit our model. But if I had just said, whoa, okay, great, but let me take it down a notch, we'll just do airports, I would have built $100 million company. I know I would have. And so I've tried to take those two lessons as I move forward: strong purpose and a narrow focus. So in Vita, that focus is the C asset multifamily asset class. I'm going to own it. I'm going to create the, Vita Living will be the category. It'll be the Apple, the Google of that space. We'll own it. And I think I'll stay in that lane and I'll beat everybody. And so, of course, as you can tell, I'm a little competitive too. But
What
those two
is
things
what
certainly
is
drive me.
what is that niche that you're in with Vita Living
Hmm.
specifically?
So we're in what I call workforce housing. So you have different asset classes, right? You have C asset class, which is, which is challenging buildings. So that could be in Spryfield, right?
Mhm.
Or North Dartmouth, and just challenging stuff. I bought the stuff in Fairview. Some of those buildings were condemned by the city. They just said, these are too dangerous. They kicked everybody out. So that's C. B would be a little nicer, older. Maybe it's 10 years old, but it's been looked after and would have higher rents. And then you have A, which is basically new construction. It's brand new. And then you have developers who build A. And so I'm going to own C, because what you see in this space in real estate is people start, the barriers of entry. It's cheaper to buy a really challenging building because it's
Mhm.
cheaper, and so they start there. They figure out the business a little bit, then they go up market, they buy B, and then they buy A, and then they start to develop. Well, with my purpose, I'm just going to stay
Stay
in
in the lane.
C. And so we only buy stuff in C. It has to be, there's this saying in the industry that I learn this stuff all the time, but they say it's got to have some hair on it. Like, you need to do some work.
Yeah.
That building needs to have hair on it is an industry term. And so we don't buy anything that doesn't have hair on it. We bought a building in Winnipeg, and I would argue it's probably the most challenging building, had the most challenging tenants in Winnipeg, in the city. And so we'll go after those. And, there's that old saying, can you turn garbage into gold? And that's what we like to do, is shake something very challenging, turn it around so that it's safe, secure, continues to be affordable, provides great amenities, great sense of community, and we can attract the right tenants who have the confidence to come back and live there with their families. And so it's a different model.
How would you, because I like what you're doing with these, and you're developing communities, you're having people in the buildings. This is your plan as you go forward to bring their assets that they bring, their skills, their talents, and
Correct.
and really invest in the building and making
Yes.
community. Can you comment on that, and also how that maybe transfers over into what you're known for, and that's culture, and like your podcast
Yeah.
that you have, scaling culture and building that culture and making a good community?
Yeah. So yeah. So what we do is, and again, this is in the spirit of doing things differently. So the C asset class, that workforce housing, that affordability sector, those who are in it do two things. When you apply, Brian, they'll say, okay, we want to make sure that you have income, whether it's government assistance or a job. And there's two really things they focus on: criminal background check. Are you a criminal in some cases? And a credit check. Those are really
Mhm.
all they do.
Mm.
Our application process is very unique. It comes from how I used to screen security guards. Now, security guards, we would screen for our values, our company values. Um, I don't think that's really fair to do to a potential tenant, because people have very different value systems. They don't work for me. But what we do is we screen for our pillars. And our pillars, we have 4 pillars, Brian: safety, security, cleanliness, community, and opportunity. And so we'll, the application, if you haven't seen it online, really ask questions around those 4 things. And are they important to you? If they're not important to you, and safety is not important, security, you're not going to be a good fit. It should be important for you to live in this community because it's important to your neighbors. And that's our process. And the last piece, opportunity, goes back to what you're talking about. It really is about getting into someone's untapped potential. And what I mean by that is, if you're a painter, maybe you do repair and maintenance work, maybe you're a plumber, whatever that is, we'll collect that data and give you first right of refusal on small projects on the building or on Vita. So for instance, we just went to our entire community and said, hey, we need a journalist. Who does journalism? And we had 3 people say, I'll do it. I'll write your newsletter. And so we had people that do customer service calls, administration stuff. We'll tap into the community to build it up and farm out small jobs, just like, no different than if you've got a small business, you want to find a bookkeeper, you go online. Well, we'll do that to the Vita community. And so it's a very different approach that I took and talk about in the book, Outrageous Empowerment, because we had no mid-level management and we had all of our frontline security guards doing, very interesting projects for the company. I'd have in Vancouver, I could have a security guard that was from India that was better than the accountant at my office. I would say, hey, instead of pressing the button to let the trucks in all night, do you want to get paid $150 and reconcile our books every week? And they'd say, yeah, no problem. Great. And now I'm finally, using my brain. This is what I'm really, this aligns with my skills. And so I believe, and I don't think most people have tapped into this in a model like Vita, but in companies, we have all these untapped resources that we don't use because, Brian, you're the accountant, so you just do accounting, but what else do you like to do? And that's my methodology on work, is connecting people's passions and skills to company needs. And so I've just doubled down and I'm doing that with Vita. I'm doing that in communities now. It pays off in a few different ways. People have a sense of ownership now, a sense of pride. If you're painting units, you care about the building all of a sudden. You've got sweat in this thing. We recycle the money. And so, you've got a job and now we pay you, and there's a high likelihood you'll pay rent too. And that's very powerful. It's got, and the third is, of course, it saves, it's a win-win. So let's say, Brian, you paint the unit, and the usual cost for a 2-bedroom is $1,000. You'll probably do it 35% under market. So we'd offer it to you at $650. You win. You're like, yeah, I'll do that, $650. Well, we just saved 35%, and you just made $650. And so it really works well. And, it doesn't come without challenges, and we have to figure it out as we go and have strong systems and processes and accountability and checks and balances, but it's great.
I was a resident manager in Halifax for a few years at a big company there, and it's a little different.
Yeah.
Quite different.
Well, the other thing too, this is interesting, and I'm sure this will hit home for you, but what I really saw in the private security industry, that what would happen was, we'd build a company in Halifax, and Brian, you'd be the operations manager. It means you hired, fired, scheduled, right? And all of a sudden we grew, we got more contracts. You'd be doing this for 100 security guards, and you would maybe last 2 years before you burned out, maybe, because your phone rang too much. The guards weren't showing up, and you'd get their uniforms on, and clients are calling. It was a disaster. And so my model was to piece that off. All of a sudden, Brian, I removed you, and I had the frontline leaders doing the same job that you would have done at a micro level. I'm using the same playbook at Vita. And what I mean by that is, we don't have property managers. We have building ambassadors. And so you probably ran a 60+ unit or something like that.
300.
What was it?
300.
300, right? Your phone was ringing. Like you wouldn't have lasted 6 months, right?
That's why we quit after 3 years.
Thank you, right?
It almost killed our marriage.
This is it. So in my model, we have building ambassadors that run between a 12 unit and a 40 unit, but that's all they run. And so, the 300 units, I have 18 people doing that. And that's not full-time work. That's what I call side hustle. I'm a carpenter, and I run my 12 units on the side. And 12, I live in one, so I'm running 11. It's fairly
Mm,
simple. Or
mhm.
20, and so we pay them a very reasonable amount, but we spread it out, and they are on a team that can then leverage each other, right? So they're on a team that is on workplace saying, oh, I've got this challenge, and someone jumps in and says, oh, Brian, here's how you deal with that, or let me come over and help. It's a very different atmosphere. No one's getting, they're not quitting their jobs over this, and that's not the purpose. The purpose is they're getting ahead because they're saving, they're being compensated. So
Yeah.
whether they adjust that against their rent or put it in their pocket, they already have a full-time job, so they do this on the side, and it balances out. It works. Sometimes it's busy, sometimes it's not busy, but allows them to participate in their community and get ahead. So it's a very different model.
What about you, Ron? You're a busy man. So what takes up your time through a week? What are you doing how do you balance that all out?
Yeah, I don't even really believe in balance anymore. I think that you get pulled in different directions, and you need to lean into it and accept
Mm,
it.
yeah.
I've got young kids, and they're up a lot. Little G could pee the bed at 4 a.m. and I have to deal with it. And so, I mean, there's a few things that I do, and I've tried to do recently. I don't try to take on too much. If I take on too much, I lose. I'm spread too thin, and I feel deflated.
Mhm.
And so what I mean by that is, I had a great, call it life coach, business coach. I had this great coach for a few years. Um, did 2 years with her. It was amazing. And then I've now moved on to a fitness coach. That's my next thing that I want to take on. I've got a guy, I don't know if you know Arnold Smith. He grew up in the pubs in Halifax. He's been excellent. So I'm doing that now. I'm trying to take on my fitness all of a sudden.
Mhm.
And so, because I only have so much time, and family's first for me. I mean, in my calendar, I could show you, but in my calendar, I know when I pick up my daughter, and when I have, like, Wednesdays, for instance, I pick her up at 2:00 and I'm with her. It's daddy date. That's today. Um, and one day a week, I keep my son home and I spend time with him. And then on the weekends, I'm very purposeful about my time, so much so that I now have two phones. I have a phone that is my work phone that I don't bring with me when I'm with my children. I got a Pablo Escobar burner phone again that nobody has a number to, that only my wife and my assistant and some family members will have, that because I'm addicted to my phone. And I know I'm self-aware enough to know my own demons and say, okay, how do I hack the system? It
Mm.
reminds me years ago of my wife today. Years ago, used to have a Toronto phone and a Vancouver phone, a Halifax phone. And we were going on one of our first dates. And I said, oh, I got to go put the phones in the car. She said, what do you mean? I said, well, I've got these three phones. I'm just going to put them in the car. She said, why do you need to do that? I said, so I don't use them. They don't bother us. I want to.
Yeah.
She said, you shouldn't have to do that. And I said, well, maybe I shouldn't have to, but I do.
Mm.
And so I know myself. And I think that's one of the important things that has been helpful to me is, not bullshitting yourself, but having self-awareness to say, wow, I don't have the discipline to not look at that phone and see if someone's emailing me about work. So if I put the phone away, then I don't have it, and then I can't use it. No different than chocolate. If there's chocolate in the house, it goes. I'm a chocoholic. If there's no chocolate, I don't eat it.
I know.
So
Me too.
that was a bit of a ramble, but purposeful about my schedule. Every minute is important to me. Time's more important than money. And so all we have is time, right?
Ron, what advice do you have for people thinking of starting as a paper boy, getting into work, young kids, or changing your job, changing your career? Some advice for people who are just getting in work.
Yeah. So I think there's two pieces. One, and this goes back to maybe what you said about me in the beginning, is there's an old saying. A very good friend of mine was speaking, named Rob Steele, and he was talking about a message from his father. And he said, there's two types of people in this world. There's people who network up, and then there's people who network up to the sides and down. And I really try to be number two, i.e., I would give a tenant having a hard time as much time as I would if I ran into Barack Obama. I just don't give a shit about who someone is.
Mhm.
And I think that everybody's got a part to play. And it's very important that you treat people with respect and equally, because one, it's good karma, and two, you just never know where someone's going to be in life, and you should always prop everybody up. And then two, um, if I had to speak to my old self, young entrepreneurs, they're full of piss and vinegar. Um, you need to learn the skill of listening at an early age. That comes way late in life. I didn't really learn how to listen until I ran into my father, who was a horrible listener. And I was like, oh my God, I'm a horrible listener. How did this happen to me? I didn't even know this guy. But to listen, sometimes when I'm talking to an early entrepreneur and having a discussion, they're already ready to defend any points I have. And that's not the purpose of the conversation.
Yeah.
The purpose of the conversation is just to listen, is just to absorb information. And I think that's important, is to really listen, because there's so much knowledge out there. And if you don't, people are in environments where they're not listening. They're actually thinking about what they should say, or they're uncomfortable with the conversation because maybe someone dug at their current process or idea. And then third, which I spoke about I was emceeing this entrepreneur conference a few years ago, and there was a panel of some older entrepreneurs, older gentlemen that were in their 60s. And I basically said to the crowd, who were in their early 20s, and I said, there's a ton of knowledge up on this stage, a ton. But for your generation, if you don't get someone on Twitter or Facebook or LinkedIn, you can't tap into the knowledge. You need to go old school. If you want to talk to these individuals, you need to show up at their office. You need to call, walk in. You need to go old school, and they'll give you the time. But they're not on LinkedIn. You'll get me on LinkedIn and I'll take your call, no problem, but not these guys and these individuals. And so I think that's very important that we lean into that, and that this younger generation of entrepreneurs, you've got 20-year-olds, I'm 40, they skip by me and go to the 60, 70-year-olds and go to them, because that's the only way you're going to get that knowledge. Sit down, bring them a coffee, have a discussion. There's so much knowledge that I believe won't get transferred because young people don't have the confidence to do that, or think it's even an option. So those three things I think are helpful
To get into work. Yeah. Great advice, Ron. You mentioned to me, I don't know if it was, you have a new book coming out.
Yes, sir.
Scaling Culture goes in line with your podcast.
Yeah, scaling culture. When I was building the private security company, and the book Outrageous Empowerment is really a story. It's meant to, hey, grab some popcorn and read the book. It's a fun read, and it's up and down, and it starts off almost like it's going to be a biography, and then kind of shifts into business a little bit. But I was always looking for the how-to, the playbook, the 1, 2, 3 punch, the system I could use. And I had the blindfold on the whole time as I was trying things. And it was a grind trying to create culture in a command and control industry like the private security industry. And so I wanted to write the playbook, like the book I didn't have, and it's the full cycle book. It is, it really is. And I haven't read a book like this, but it's how to create culture, how to create your core values, how to execute your values, how to screen for your values, how to onboard for your values, how to operate as a team, how to implement a culture of change and change management, how to create a culture of inclusivity and diversity and learning and innovation, a culture of coaching. It really hits on all the key buckets that you need to have an incredible culture. And so, yeah, I'm really excited, and we're launching with a masterclass that can be taken. That is really a shortened version of all that. So I'm excited. I think it's good. I'm an avid reader. I've read probably every culture book there is, and a lot of it is, we see two things. It's theory. You should have a good culture and treat people well. Great, genius. But how do I do that? And then you have two is, we've studied these companies, but I've lived it. And I think there's very different between like, oh, I got to see a little bit behind the curtain of what that company did, to here's what I did. Here was the roadblock. Here's the challenge. Here's how I got around it. Here's the system I used. That's a different conversation. I really wanted to create a book where someone had the highlighter and was like, oh, that's gold. I need to go and try that, and that's the vision for this book.
Besides your own companies that you're working with, do you see another company that's able to do what you're purporting, what you're saying is one of the best ways to create culture, a good culture?
Sorry, Ron, what do you mean? Like, do I kind of envy a company? Or
Not envy. Is there just someone they're doing a pretty good job and you can take some cues from them?
Yeah, I think that lots are doing a good job,
Yeah,
and I've got to know lots of them through our podcast.
yeah,
It's been great. And so, if Southwest Airlines has always been an icon for me. Sherry Conway Perez is one of my key advisors. She's actually writing the forward for the book. She's on our board. She's just phenomenal. And that company has just done a phenomenal job. I don't care. Anyone can poke at anybody anytime, but I'll say pound for pound, they've done an incredible job. And the book Nuts was pivotal in my journey because I just couldn't believe the stories of um, Herb Keller and what he was achieving, who was the original founder. And it was incredible. It was so inspiring. And so I always love Southwest Airlines, and there's lots of companies that I
yeah.
think are
That's
doing a
good.
great job. They really are.
And I think you're doing a great job, Ron. It's scaling culture. I have a few more questions for you if you don't mind.
No, shoot.
What is your overall goal? Maybe an overarching goal that maybe you have for your new book coming out. You have the master class, but you have your hat in a lot of different things. So do you have an overarching thing?
Yeah. I mean, I want to be in industries that I can challenge status quo. That's for sure. I mean, I like industries that I can flip on their head, like private security. See, the private security industry, we flipped it on its head. I'm now doing that in the roofing space. Affordable living and workforce housing. I want to flip it on its head. I'm not a technologist. I have a high EQ, maybe not IQ, but I can flip something upside down, and I really get energized about that. So that's one. But with Vita, it was, could I be in a business? The question was, could I be in a business that was safe, that could create wealth and have strong cash flow, safe being asset backed, and
Mhm.
have a social impact? And the answer to that was Vita. I mean, you've got asset backed, it's safe,
Yeah.
you've got a building which is an asset. It produces cash flow, and we're making a social impact. I mean, I think it's kind of like this golden triangle. That's why, the plan is 10,000 units in 5 years. And I'm sure in year 7, I'll be blinking saying, wow, we've got 40,000 units. 10 was pretty small. Because I think that our model can work globally. And so, I want to have an impact. And I think that's poking at old industries and trying to have some type of impact that's beyond financial, I think is important.
With the impact that you're trying to make and that I think you are making, is there something that people may not understand about you that would give them a better appreciation what you are accomplishing?
Hmm. You know, I mean, I have my own personal vision statement. I have my own, person that I certainly want to become in the future. And there's some key items in there. And one is that I'll always help people. Someone needs a hand. It drives my wife crazy. Why are you helping these people? You don't even know them. And look, I think that we all as Canadians, and a lot of people globally, um, won the lottery. If you can get fresh water, in some cases you won the lottery. And so I certainly feel like I won the lottery 10 times over. And I also feel like I've and luckily I enjoy it, but you have to pay your dues. And so I've had a lot of people help me on my ride. I've had a lot of people answer my phone call, a lot of people that have stuck their neck out for me. And so I'll continue to do that for folks. It is not often that someone reaches out to me and I don't give them time. And so I think that we don't understand and we underestimate the impact that these micro conversations have. I
Mhm.
know that when someone reaches out to me and have a conversation, they're probably never going to call me again. They're going to take that information, maybe take some of it, throw some out and move on. And that will have its own impact. And I think um, that's important.
Ron, just a couple more. Thinking of adversity that we all face, do you have encouragement for people who are looking to work, can't find work, they're out of work, and they're facing some sort of adversity in their life, but work is good even though it's tough?
You know, I don't know if this is the right answer, and there's no one answer for this, but
No.
I just believe from my own experience that in most cases we get in our own way, that we created, you know, our own blockers, and we get in our own way, and our own belief systems of what we can or can't do.
Yeah.
Um, prohibit us from doing great things. And so I think in some cases it's just about a state of mind and saying, I can do this, because people follow the process too much. Someone applies for a job and they, doesn't matter what the job is, but they go on the online application and they put an application in. I would never apply for a job. Brian, if you put an ad up and I needed a job, I'm showing up with a coffee. Hey, Brian, I saw the ad up. I did apply, but I wanted to have 5 minutes of your time. I would send a package to your office. I would show you that I'm very different. And that's just because of confidence and a belief. I could get in line with everybody else, and you're not going to look at my resume. And so I think it's time to shake things up, and people have to get out of their own way, lean into things, get creative, and really punch above their waist on how they're trying to achieve their goals. If you just sit back and we're back to woe is me. Oh, I've applied for 10 places, and if you want, that's going to be you who allows that to conquer you and say that I've applied for 10. There's nobody getting back to me. I can't get a job. I'm done now. That I would say that's your fault. And look, there's other issues. We have mental health issues and whatnot that
Yeah.
can complicate that. But overall,
Mhm.
I think that's a big theme that I see.
How can people get in contact with you, Ron?
Yeah, I'm active on LinkedIn. I'm not on Instagram or Facebook much,
You
but
have
LinkedIn.
ronnielovett.ca as well.
Yeah, ronnielovett.ca. Yeah, so I do some speaking and mostly around people and culture. But yeah, ronnielovett.ca and LinkedIn. Those are the best ways to. And I think the book Outrageous Empowerment's on Amazon. You could grab it on Amazon.
And coming Scaling Culture, and your podcast, Scaling Culture
That's right.
Podcast.
The Scaling Culture podcast, which if you're a culture junkie, it's great.
Yep.
We've tapped into people that typically don't have a large voice, but have a ton of great content and experience. And that's our goal, is how do we untap those individuals so they can share their knowledge with everyone. So it's been a lot of fun.
Ron, one final question, and sir, why do you work?
Yeah. I think for me, it's a connection to passion and purpose, right? And so, as I mentioned, if I have strong purposes and I believe in those purposes in the companies that I'm involved with, then it gets me up, it gets me jazzed. And my passion is helping people and flipping things on their head. And so if I get that aligned, then I love what I'm doing. And so I'm very blessed and lucky to be in industries that I'm doing that exact thing.
Ron Lovett, entrepreneur, keynote speaker, author of Outrageous Empowerment and Scaling Culture. Thank you for your time, and I appreciate the work that you do, Ron.
Thanks, Brian. Thanks for having me.